Good afternoon, and thank you for joining today's annual meeting session. My name is Ali Land, and I'm the Deputy Project Manager working with BJA's Body-Worn Camera Training and Technical Assistance Program. As a reminder, points of view or opinions expressed herein do not necessarily represent the official position or policies of the U.S. Department of Justice. And I will now pass it off to Dr. Eiley Malm of California State University, Long Beach, to begin the session, Voices from the Field, Sustaining Body-Worn Camera Program Success. Eiley?
Hi, thank you so much, Ali. My name is Dr. Eiley Malm, and I'm a professor at Cal State University, Long Beach. And I have been a body-worn camera TTA subject matter expert since 2018. And I conducted some of the first research on body-worn cameras way back in 2014 and 2015 with the Anaheim Police Department in California. So I'm pleased to moderate this Voices from the Field panel. This is always an incredibly informative panel as we hear straight from police leaders about their experiences with body-worn cameras. All right, so how I'd like to start is by asking each of our participants to introduce themselves and then also to provide a brief description of their agency, its body-worn camera program, including when you first deployed the cameras and the current status that you're in now. So perhaps we'll start with Chief Ash.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me for this event. I'm Chief Cecilia Ash. I'm a 27-year veteran in law enforcement. I'm currently the Chief of Milford Police Department in Milford, Delaware. I entered into this position in February of 2023. I had 17 years experience with Wilmington Police Department in the northern part of our state, and also served in Arlington County, Virginia, prior to moving to Delaware. Currently, the department I'm with, Milford, Delaware, is a smaller agency. It has about 37 officers, and we have had cameras here proudly since 2014. In my prior department with Wilmington, that was a 320 officer department, and we started our camera program there in 2021. So that is kind of the integral part that I did there in Wilmington as far as getting them off of the ground with the body-worn camera program and then figuring out how to sustain it successfully here in Milford.
Great. Thank you so much, Chief Ash. Mr. Karkov, can we hear from you next in Houston PD?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kyle Karkov. I'm a retired police officer and former director of emergency management for the Rutgers Police Department. I'm currently an IT manager with the Houston Police Department. Our department size is 5,200 sworn officers, and we're just shy of 1,000 civilians to support them. We have 3,500 body cameras deployed, and we started our body camera deployment over 9 years ago, over the procurement process, but over 9 years. And our first field deployment was in April of 2015. At that time, we started with 2,500 cameras for our officers that were in the call for service loop or our first responders. And then over time, we have rolled that out to specialty units. So we've outfitted our SWATs and our narcotics teams and our specialty teams. So right now, everybody in Houston Police Department that is at a sergeant level or below that's in the call for service loop or has any interaction on a daily basis with the public now has a camera, and we're now up to 3,500 body cameras. We produce about 2.6 million videos every year, so we have quite a bit of video data, and I think to date we've collected 15.5 million videos over the time that we've had the body camera and in-car systems going.
Great, thank you so much. And last but not least, Chief Boland, please.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian Owen. I'm the police chief in Brunswick, Ohio. I'm in my 33rd year of law enforcement and have been chief here since 2017. We are a suburban agency in the Cleveland metro area. Our experience with body-worn cameras is relatively young. After I became chief, I wanted to pursue expanding our use of technology. And at the time, we were actually what I consider behind the curve in terms of video, because we only had a couple of police cars outfitted with video systems. So I initially was looking into outfitting the police fleet-wide with camera systems. And then of course, it became apparent that it would be prudent to look at body cam options at that time. So we became aware of BJA's grant opportunity and put in an application to help fund our body camera initiative. And we were fortunate to get awarded funding And so we developed a project that resulted in outfitting both the police fleet, all police cruisers, marked police cars, and obtaining our first 25 body cams at that point. We have 40 sworn police officers, so we used those 25 cameras once they were procured and training was set up in a kiosk sign out kind of system. So that was our experience for the first 2 years of the program. In 2021, we applied for an expansion grant with BJA and were awarded some additional dollars to get 25 additional cameras. So now we're essentially able to outfit every police officer with a camera. They're not personally assigned, unless perhaps you're a supervisor or in the detective bureau. You got cameras right in your work area, but we do have enough now to outfit all officers when they're, on duty and doing police functions. So that's been our initial experience.
Thank you all. And we're really excited that you're all here with us. You represent a great breadth of police department size too, from small to mid-size all the way up to very large departments. How I want to start off is I understand that at first your agencies had some officers that were reluctant to have cameras, as is the case with many police departments that are just starting off with the BWC program. How did you eventually achieve officer and stakeholder buy-in for your programs? And we'll start with Chief Olin.
Yes, thank you. So I think the key to our success was just being open and transparent about the process to begin with. I think we had some officers already seeing the value of having police video in cruiser cam situations. Again, only part of the fleet, basically our traffic unit, had cameras. And so I think there was already a recognition that that tool, that technology would provide good assistance in building cases and just helping them do their job more efficiently. So when we endeavored to expand police video across the fleet and then body cameras, also because we were kind of, again, I would think sort of late in the game to using body cams, there was plenty of information out there, in different police training forums, I think, that showed the value of what body cam footage would do for a police officer doing their job. So we highlighted those advantages, again, open and transparent about our process, about our grant application, of course, eventually being awarded the dollars. And then, once we got the equipment and began to develop and deploy policy and training on the policy, training on using the devices, everybody got exposed to that. In working with the TTA team through BJA, it was super helpful to kind of walk us through the process step by step, and making sure that our policy was solid, making sure that our training initiatives were solid, and looking for those best practices. We weren't reinventing the wheel, so we were going off of a lot of other colleagues in the profession that have done it and done it successfully. We're able to, draw those parallels, and then getting community stakeholder buy-in is another really important component to a successful deployment. We engaged with a number of different entities, but a few examples, would be leadership within our own city, our city manager and safety director, our city council, interfacing with citizens. That primarily our path there was citizens who participated in our Citizens Police Academy program, and they were, after that program, became volunteers for us. We worked with our prosecutor's office, both at the local level and the county level. So bringing all those stakeholders to the table also was important in deploying a successful program.
Thank you so much. Chief Ash, can you tell us a little bit about your experience in achieving officer and stakeholder buy-in?
Yeah, so I'll speak from the Wilmington perspective. As I indicated, we started the program in 2021 under the BGA grant. However, with that, we did a pilot program prior in 2016. And really kind of my strategy to that was getting diversity of officers so that I have diversity of thought and approach to what are going to be some of the challenges that we may face. And what I mean by that is, getting everybody from the first year officer going out on the street to the president of the FOP or a union to really make sure that we're getting a diversity of opinion, because I think that sets the groundwork for what are going to be my challenges, what are going to be my successes in that type of program. And I was actually shocked. I asked for volunteers, and we had, I think it was like 25 officers came forward and were willing to do it. Some were reluctant, exactly to your point, but others were very positive. And I was actually taken back and shocked, because I thought a lot of this was going to be the negative spin, or more of a challenge than what we actually dealt with. And so what that created was, it created great communication, exactly to what the chief was talking about with your stakeholders, and creating that conversation of what are our policies going to look like? Do we have to, Delaware's a very small state, do we have to renegotiate portions of our contract to adhere to state laws and state policies? And so that really kind of gave us the framework that was very beneficial. One of the things that I found extremely beneficial, in some cases I knew we were on the right track, and others it guided us, was really the toolkit of sitting there and going through that checklist of when we, got the grant or we're getting ready to apply for it, of who are the stakeholders that you have engaged, exactly to the chief's point, the prosecutor's office, community leaders, unions. So it really gave us a good direction with the toolkit on, this is how we can make our policies applicable, and kind of making sure that we're to that national best standard. And I think, when we look at our engagement with our communities, for me as an executive, there was no better counter argument to a city council that may be in some cases adversarial and demanding certain things, to say, hey, look, this is how we're deploying this. This is why we're deploying it. And here's what the federal government has set as that standard that we should be trying to meet, to that TTA provider and that national standard. So in the end, it came down to, I was very pleased with a lot of the officers' feedback, and just a majority of cops want it. I think the media will spin it a different way, because that sells tickets to the show, right? But what it comes down to is, a lot of officers want people to see what they deal with from their perspective. And I think it's also about teaching the community that when we're dealing with this, please keep in mind, this is a 4-pane window, and you're only seeing 1 pane of that 4-pane window in these type of situations. So that's just some of the ways that we got the buy-in. I think one of the other things that I'll leave as my final point is, I'm very much, a philosophy in my leadership is from the top down. So for me, it was about every single officer wearing body-worn cameras. That may not be practical for some agencies because of size or because of their, financial or budget constraints. But I think it's very important to not create a divide within your own department of saying, hey, we're just going to put this in patrol, but everybody else is exempt, right? You don't have to worry about it. It's really from the top down of being a chief to a deputy chief and wearing it and showing that you're not afraid to wear it either, and you're going to be held to the same standard as everybody else.
Some excellent information there. Kyle, do you want to tell us a little bit about your experience with Houston PD and getting officer and stakeholder buy-in?
Sure. First of all, I agree with both the chiefs. Everything they said is very relevant today. Back in 2014, when Houston started, we were an early adopter, especially for an agency of our size. So while we did try to get stakeholder buy-in from, city council members and the politicians, we had church groups, we had defense attorneys, we had the union, we had the prosecutor, we had the public, we had a series of public meetings. I think one of the things I would caution is, in the early days, the public, I think, was, it was overestimated what the cameras would do for the public, and the officers certainly underestimated the value. We did invite the union in. They were involved in both the procurement process, the selection, and the policy. And I think that was one of the biggest things that helped us through. We did kind of have to force the BWCs onto the force more than we probably would have liked to. But like I say, back in 2014, there wasn't a lot of large agencies to look at. So there wasn't a lot to model ourselves after. The big things I think that we did were, one, like Chief Ash just said, is we started having senior leaders start to wear them. So it wasn't so much like we've shoved everything into the patrol officer. And, having been one, sometimes it feels that way, that, everything gets shoved on patrol. So we started to have senior leaders model. We also started to celebrate the exoneration of officers, through the use of body cams. Back in the day, when you got an IA complaint, usually the best you could hope for was not sustained because there just wasn't enough evidence one way or the other. But now with body cam video, we actually are exonerating officers. We're actually able to sit down with complainants that come in and say, the officer did this, that, or the other. The supervisors are able to review that video right then and there with the complainants. And a lot of times, a lot of people choose based on what they see, not to go forward because it's just not true what they said. So once we started pushing that out, the success and how useful the cameras were, not so much for law enforcement purposes, but protecting officers, is when we really start to get buy-in. I will tell you, in 2015, at the end of that year, we had an abnormally high turnover rate from officers retiring. And one of the number one issues was body cameras. So officers at a certain point in their career were just very reluctant to wear a camera. The younger officers was not a problem. A lot of them are used to being on video. They video chat. They've taken videos. They've grown up kind of that environment. So that was a generational shift in law enforcement. And as we recruit to fill shortages, we're recruiting more and more officers that are younger. So the opposition today is we've flipped 180 degrees. We had more officers than not that did not want the cameras, didn't want anything to do with them. And that causes activation issues and compliance issues as well. To now, most of the officers would probably not hit the streets without a camera. So the big thing was the training, allowing the officers to have a say in policy. So we have a group of sergeants that meet on a quarterly basis who represent the officers, and they bring up issues and talk about policy, changes to policy, have an impact on it. Our policy is a living policy. It's posted publicly online. We have probably changed that. I've lost track, but well over 25 times have we changed that policy. So it's constantly being updated. So I think the advice I would give is those two things would be, one is once you start this program, celebrate the success of the body cameras, particularly as it personally involves officers, and also let the officers know that they have a voice in how the body cameras are used by having the ability to impact the policy.
And all of your experiences, I'm sure, ring true to a lot of our audience members as well. And you've all touched on this a little bit already, but before we move into some of the newer issues with body-worn cameras, I just want to have you sort of touch on one or two primary elements that you think have been really integral in helping your agency sustain a successful body-worn camera. And maybe we can start with Kyle.
For us, the biggest success factor has been the fact that the technology service department has always owned the body camera program. It started with us through procurement, and we are the custodians of it. I'm on my 4th chief of police. I've had 5 assistant or deputy chiefs. 2 months ago, I had 3 chiefs in the period of 2 months. So with that kind of turnover, especially at a large agency, it's really hard to have that consistency. So one of the things for sustainment is to have a place where there's a home for the program that doesn't have a lot of turnover. There's a lot involved with body cameras, more than people realize if you haven't done it. Ultimately, all this stuff has to be used for courtroom purposes and evidence, and has to get to the DA, and they have to get it to defense. So there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of reasons why we use the body camera. And we'll probably talk about those, and I'm sure the chiefs have their own experiences. But there's a lot of moving parts, and without some continuity over it, I have seen other agencies where it initially starts and then it's going well, and then they farm it out, the pieces of it, to different parts of the department, and then it kind of loses its overall flair. And we have not done that. So all the maintenance and support and the funding, obviously I'm not the final decision maker, but I do have a seat at the table, and I do get to tell the chiefs the status of the program and where we are, and advise them, of if we're going to do this could be the impact, and they make the decisions. But having a home and having a place that does not have a lot of turnover is a huge benefit. And for us, that's my biggest advice. That has been the biggest thing to make this successful for Houston PD, is having that continuity.
Great advice. Chief Olin, how about you?
Yeah, okay, thanks. I think kind of in summary, the element that's led us to sustain a successful program is, I guess, proof positive in what these cameras can do to enhance our jobs. And what I mean by that, I mean, there's a host of examples of ways that the body cam footage can help in different cases, but I'm going to share a particular case with you that one of our detectives just shared with me recently. And it started off as a call for service of a woman who fell down a stair. Well, I'll put in quotes, fell down a staircase in an apartment building. And so EMS and patrol responded, and there was a young child on the scene, as well as a boyfriend and the victim. Ultimately, the victim was taken to the hospital for medical treatment. And really, due to the chaos on the scene at the time, the patrol officers were basically dealing with the immediacy of the medical emergency and dealing with a young child who we needed to bring in proper care for, et cetera. And so really, once that was dealt with, there was suspicion that something had occurred, that maybe criminally, that led to the injury. And so it was after where a couple of detectives could sit down and review the body cam footage of the patrol officers on the scene and really see subtle things that were occurring, body language things that were observed on the part of the boyfriend who was on the scene. Ultimately, there wasn't enough evidence to file criminal charges against the boyfriend, who we suspect pushed the woman down the stairs. But what this body camera footage was able to do was relay information to a parole officer, because the suspect was on parole, and some of the elements that were documented in the video led to a parole violation, and ultimately the suspect was incarcerated for that reason. County Job and Family Services were able to review video and will be involved concerning the welfare of this young 2-year-old who was on the scene. So I offer those particulars just to illustrate how much the body cam video can do to help us do our jobs better. And I think that in other instances is just proof positive that they're a good tool. And I think Kyle mentioned, basically most of my police officers don't want to go out in the field and work a shift without a body camera. It's just something that I don't want to say rely on, but it's just an important tool that they carry, like the many other things that a police officer carries on their duty belt to help them do their job. And that's where we're at today in our program. And I think that has helped us sustain the program.
Thank you, Chief. And Chief Ash, can you tell us maybe one or two things that have helped your agency sustain a successful body-worn camera program?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to give you 3, actually. So I think when agencies have to look at sustainability, first is advancement, right? We have to look at how do we continue to advance in the technology so it doesn't get stale, it doesn't get old, because the quickest way you're going to lose faith in the officers is keep giving them old equipment. So I think that's something that as executives and people within these programs have to look at, prepare your city councils and prepare your budgets on how do we continue to grow the program. As anybody knows in this field, technology is constantly changing. And so we have to prepare the budgets to reflect that. I think also too, when we look at sustainability, there's 2 other components that have to be very important in this process. The first being communication. The command staff has to be clear in what their expectations are, setting the standard, having those conversations with the officers, like I said, in developing the policies and being there. When we deployed our body-worn camera, as painful as it was, I attended every single training session, because sometimes there are just people, to Kyle's point, he's at the table, right? But he may not be able to answer questions that officers may have that really has to come from the top down. And officers want to know, if this happens, what do I need to do? If that happens, how do I handle that? And they want to know, do their bosses have their back? I think also the other major component to a successful program is accountability. You can have cameras all day long. If you don't have means of accountability for the officers, for staff, and what I mean by that is making sure officers, we have policies and procedures in place that hold officers accountable for when their cameras have to come on, when they can turn them off. Also, simple things, tagging them to, Kyle's point, evidence is key. And if there's any delay in that process, it really starts to affect, the image of the public on policing as well as prosecutors on policing. And I think when we look at accountability, the final end of that has to be sitting there and making sure that we're transparent with the public on how do we audit these things? How are we holding the officers accountable so that the community knows and can build faith in the fact that, they're not just wearing the cameras and nobody's looking at them, or there's no process of accountability. So I think when we look at sustainability, you have to look at continuing to advance technology. How do we communicate the message to not only our internal staff, but our external, as well as, just creating those measures of accountability.
Excellent points. I'm going to move a little bit now towards some of the new issues in body-worn cameras. And one of them is using footage in training. So if you could tell me some of the ways that you may have integrated body-worn camera footage into some of your training programs. And we'll start with Chief Ash.
Yeah, so that was kind of one of our major challenges here in Delaware is our Officer Bill of Rights. And, you always have cases where there may be a use of force and you want to use it as a training exercise. One example that I can give is, the last day we had the last platoon come in and get trained. 3 hours later, that platoon went on the street, and 3 hours later, 3 of our officers were shot. Luckily, all of them survived and all of them returned back to work to a year later. So we're very blessed for that. But there were a lot of things that were good learning lessons that we had to really strategically think out because, in that case, they had returned fire on the suspect. So now we have a criminal plus an internal investigation, plus you have Officer Bill of Rights. So if officers are making mistakes in the video, how do we handle that? So I'm not going to act as if I know, because I don't have the perfect answer for that other than, with Wilmington, we continued to work through it to really work with the FOP on, hey, this is something where we really need to look at these videos to improve the officer safety, improve their expectations of what are they seeing in these videos and what are the cameras capable of. I think it's something that, was kind of the next phase that we were moving into in phase 2 of how do we do this and do it equitably, but also legally.
Kyle, can you tell us a little bit about how Houston has integrated body-worn camera footage in training?
Yes, just like Chief Ash just brought up, a lot of those, we face the same issues. I'm sure nationwide, that's the same issue. Largely, what we try to do is we try to have supervisors, when they're reviewing the video, they try to look for incidents, both positive and negative, right? We want the officers that are doing a really good job and have a good citizen contact or a really good traffic stop or whatever the case might be. We want to highlight those as well. So though there's a process that we have where they can recommend the video to the training academy to be included in that. So that's one step when the officers are doing these supervisory reviews. The next step is that we have a training academy and we have training academy staff and they routinely view videos to see if there's anything there that's of value for training. And even though we're a large agency, when something happens, everybody knows the officers that's involved. So some of the issues we looked at is, like maybe trying to blur out or mask identities and stuff. It really doesn't work because if it's an incident that's big, if it's that big and we're going to want to show it as training, it probably has gotten around the department already to those officers that are involved. So there are a lot of issues around it. Sometimes we'll do reenactment. Sometimes we'll, reshoot the scene, so to speak, with stage with officers. We have a video team at the academy that does that, and for scenarios for training for the new cadets. So that's the last area is we try to take these issues that are learned, right, and incorporate that into the training that happens at the academy. The cadets will probably not see some of the video because of what it shows, but a lot of things with officers' permission, they're able to show those, and the cadets can see, real world in the environment that they're going to work in, rather than some canned production, what they're really going to face. And I think using those three things and putting officer privacy and sensitivity to officers that are injured in it, it's hard to find somebody who doesn't know that officer or didn't go to the academy. So reviewing some of these events can evoke a lot of emotions in some of the officers, or quite a few officers across the department. But having officers supervisor review, looking for good events and bad events, having the academy look for those events, and then trying to incorporate those events into our current training for our classified officers that are doing, research certification training, and for the training for the new cadets.
It is a complex balancing act, isn't it? Chief Olin, do you have anything that you'd like to add here?
Yeah, thank you. To piggyback on both Chief Ash and some of Kyle's comments with regard to supervisory review and basically documenting both things that might need improvement through training or the positive things that we see officers do on a regular basis. We kind of do that in three ways. Our patrol supervisors are required to review video of each officer under their command. I believe they have to do a minimum of 2 videos a month, and the supervisor documents that in a personnel performance management system we use called Guardian Tracking. And so that gives the officers direct feedback about what the supervisor is seeing. And I really believe the vast majority, a high percentage, is good, positive work. We also have supervisor review of vehicle pursuits that involves both in-car camera and body camera. But anytime there's a vehicle pursuit, designated supervisor reviews that and provides feedback both to the officers involved and to command staff on how we did. And if it identifies any training gaps, we'll make sure we cover that in an in-service training environment. Also, what we call aggression response, or some people call it use of force. But if an officer, deploys a taser or uses control techniques or a baton or what have you, the supervisor in charge of that program also will review the body cam and again look for good things that were done that can maybe be shared in a roll call training environment, or find a training gap where we need to cover something again. And the final piece that we use it in a training way is in our field training. So the field training officers, if they're training a recruit, they can later sit down and look at the body cam maybe of traffic stop approaches, or how, if there's any concerns with regard to interacting with a citizen on the scene of a call, by being able to look at camera from a different angle, they can just use it as a teaching moment to go over things that can be made better. So 30 some years ago when I was in field training, didn't have that opportunity to see the video. I think as a cadet officer or rookie officer today, to be able to look at it and learn from it from video, that's a great advantage.
Great. Thank you all so much. And I just want to remind our audience too, that if you have any questions for our participants, please put them in the chat and we'll make sure to ask them. Another issue that is becoming a more timely issue is that some agencies have started to use body-worn camera videos to engage their community. Are your agencies leveraging the technology in this way for this purpose as well? Chief Olin.
Yeah, so community engagement is really the latest buzzwords for, I think, what we've been doing in our profession for many, many years, community policing and different things that it's been called over the years. But community engagement is vital to us doing the work that we do successfully. We've incorporated some body cam video into our social media platforms. One example that comes to mind is a case where some officers used life-saving measures on a baby not breathing call. And we were able to share that video in social media, and it caught the attention of Cleveland area media. And again, it was great work on the part of our officers. And because we had the video, it just, I don't know, it highlights and makes it real. So there are opportunities where engaging the community and letting them see video is helpful, because of course, we all too often see how the media tends to focus on the headliner stuff, and like Chief Ash said, what's going to sell a lot of tickets to the show, and many times it's negative things, and so we need to be our own best advocates to show the positive work that our staff does, and video is a great place to do that.
Counteracting that sort of media narrative is really important right now when we're going into we're in our recruitment and retention crisis. So it becomes even more important to be a good PR person for your department. Chief Ash, can you tell us a little bit about how you may have used, or your agency may have used, body-worn camera footage to engage the community?
Yeah, so I think, to your point, I think we're our own worst enemy, in the sense that we really don't do a good job advertising the great work that we do. I think that body-worn cameras, to the chief's point, is an excellent way to kind of give a day in the life, right? Give the community a true perspective on what do these officers face every day. And for me, it doesn't have to be this dramatic approach. I think it is very crucial that, to the chief's point, that people see the struggles that officers go through of rescuing babies, and whether it's, drowning people, that is what police officers do. And it is a struggle, and it leads into officer health and wellness. But I also think it's important to kind of show that we have a funny side. And there's humor in this job too. Not everything is, 0 to 60, right? So like one example that was a huge hit for our agency, and the media doesn't surprise me much, but the community still does. We had an officer who activated their camera, and when he got there, he thought he was going on one type of call, and he actually ended up rescuing a whole set of little ducklings out of a sewer. And we just posted it, and Ducks Unlimited hit on it, and before we knew it, we had 300,000 views. So it just shows, like, just don't overthink it. Do the simple things first, and really show that there's multiple sides to police, but we also have that human perspective.
Great advice. Kyle, can you tell us a little bit about what Houston PD does here?
Yes, I think there's not a whole lot of benefits to being a large agency, but one of the benefits is that we do have an entire office of community affairs that is staffed with people that do nothing but look for these stories. So that's a tremendous benefit for us. If you don't have someone dedicated to it, no matter what size agency you are, you definitely need to have someone who is interacting with the public and letting these stories out. And like both the chiefs said, you have to tell the story. Sometimes police work is ugly, and we have to show that for transparency, and we do. So our mayoral mandate is anytime there's a use of force, like officer involved shooting or an excessive use of force or something that we think would impact the community, we have 30 days to release that video and/or videos that we get. So it's not just all body cam videos. Sometimes it's store video or other videos that are sent to us. So that's a tall task, but we do get that out for transparency. But there's also a lighter side to police work, like Chief Ash brought up, and we do get to publicize that as well. And we use the social media. We're on all the major social medias. So again, if you're not, you probably need to get somebody who can do that. Definitely recommend somebody younger. I'm in IT, and I don't really understand social media. It's sad to say, but we do have a lot of people that do, and they use it very well. And we're out on the Instagram and the Twitter and Facebook and X now, whatever it is, Periscope, all the major social media events. So we do a lot of publicity events. We do, like, we're in a Pride Parade, and we have the Astros have fortunately won the World Series a couple times. We're waiting for the Texans to get in there. But we have a lot of events, and we do like to show off, the officer interaction that we have. We do have our share of protests. Unfortunately, we've been very lucky in Houston, but we also like to show the officers interacting during that protest and how civil our officers are and how dedicated they are to making sure that people have their First Amendment rights to protest and be heard. And that's important to get out. So all that messaging is very important. And body cameras play, an in-car video, if you have it, play a very important role. And there's tons of video in there. for an agency of any size to be transparent, but also to show those positive interactions with the community and some of the wonderful things that officers do on a daily basis that the news doesn't want to show those, but so we have to get those out ourselves.
Thank you all. Kyle, I have a question from the audience for you at Houston. They're wondering why the rank above sergeant was excluded from participation in body-worn cameras. Was there any objection from within the agencies or the public with this practice?
So largely, one of the downsides to being a large agency is cost, right? Cameras cost a lot, storage costs a lot. So it wasn't that the lieutenants that we sought to exclude them. We just simply, our first go around is we had $7 million and we had to make that work, and we had to get them into the, where we felt they were needed. Right now, everybody at the rank of lieutenant and below in patrol does have a camera now that we've expanded to 3,500. But that was just simply a matter of cost. As cameras got a little bit cheaper, as we got more money from city council and buy-in from our stakeholders on this, that we've slowly expanded that. But this was simply a purely an economic decision.
Very understandable. Well, we only have 4 minutes left, so I want to end with maybe all of our participants can have one thing that they can tell us quickly that they would have done differently in implementing their body-worn camera program. And we'll start with, let's start with Kyle, since you're.
Yeah, so the thing that I would have done differently, and I've been through 2 contracts now, is I would tell you, whoever you go with, the camera is probably fine. My best advice for you is to look at the end product and where you need to get it to prosecution, your prosecutors, and find a system that can collect this information, that can store it in a way that you can retrieve it, and that allows you, without a lot of effort, to be able to get it over to prosecution, to defense attorneys, release it to the public. It's really all about storage. It's about how you can access the data that you collect. You're going to collect a lot of video. And like I said, just about any camera on the market is going to be fine. I think we focus too much on the camera and not the back end system and all the things that we now struggle with. Who's auditing, who's looking at video, can we look at it, how do we share it? Those are the really big questions. Look at the system rather than the camera.
Good advice. Chief Olin, is there one thing that you would have done differently?
I'll tell you, Kyle hit some key points there. I think being prepared for the reality of staff to do redactions, storage, record retention, managing all of the space that you need for that. I mean, we've been able to accomplish it internally. We have our own storage on site through our IT department, but sharing the video with the other stakeholders, the other entities, prosecutors, and all the different requesters of the video and how to process it, redact it, and get it there is an ongoing challenge, and that's something that anybody getting into this program needs to be very mindful of. And and again, look to people who have experienced it and look for their lessons learned and best practices. But keep that high up on the list.
Great point. And to close us off, Chief Ash, is there something that you would have done differently?
Yeah, I think when we look at it, my one piece of advice to anybody is as you're rolling out this type of program, naturally you as a police executive or somebody within the police department is going to field a lot of questions either from the public or from city council. And one piece of advice that I would give is a lot of times I was fielding questions about officer privacy, legal questions, and really having the right people at the table so that you can kind of pass the buck and defer it to the legal experts, just as I don't want somebody telling me how to police, me giving legal advice, or the position I think is important too, because it can give an impression that you're not supportive of the program and or you're not being transparent or you're taking the officer's side. So I think having a city attorney or some type of, just having diversity at the table to be able to answer community questions.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for your time today. And I've learned a lot. I think our audience members have too. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference.